My name is Colin Jordan.
Colin Jordan.
Okay.
And you were...
Hold on a second, guys.
I was
want
a
to get you both.
fireman just a fireman in the Bronx and Harlem for 22 and a half years. Then I had a heart attack March 11, 1999. So I'd moved out. I'm home. I'm living in Connecticut. See the one tower down. The second tower, a friend of mine called up who was still working. Said we had a recoil. Do you want to come in? I met him. Always a good day to ride in with somebody else. Drove in with him. He was a Bronx fireman. He was a lieutenant in the Bronx company. So I went there. Everybody's mobilized. Everybody's confused.
Right.
I said, all right, give me the meal money. I went to the supermarket, bought about $200 worth of food, made a nice sauce, chopped garlic. Because when I left my house, my wife was yelling, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You already had hot. I said, I'm going to make garlic. I'm going to chop garlic. I'm going to make a nice sauce. I made a nice meal prepared for 100 people because obviously it's a long thing.
Right.
So, and then eventually they got called down and being retired, I said, all right, because we went down in the van to meet another fire truck. I said, I will come with you so you always have an additional person. You know, because the 6 guys would have to work. I would be with the van, then I would be at the fire truck, and that way you always have somebody who knows. The city was very panicky all day. Very, very strange situation in New York. Just panic all day. So I went there. Later on, after dark and everything else, we finally got to the firehouse and the captain there, 7 truck, which was the second firehouse. So they're the ones where the French film photographers were. So then I was there, walked down the corner, could see the famous picture of all the steel work still standing up and everything else. I got in a golf cart and drove around and just shuffled people around. So I had an interesting view of half the area. There was the other half by Vesey Street and Winter Garden and stuff. I never went there. I'm old enough that I just want to do what I can but not impose. So I'd shuffle people around, talking to FBI agents. Seeing FBI agents in Manhattan with nylon jackets and shotguns was very strange, giving people rides. The amazing thing to me was the dust everywhere. City Hall is blocks and blocks away, and by the end of the park, there was this much dust.
About 4 inches. And how fine was that dust? Was it like
Very
talcum
fine.
powder?
Like talcum powder.
Not like sand?
No, it was definitely something that you were conscious and breathing. They gave everybody masks that half the people, firemen are not the brightest people in the world, or very slow reactionary. So people had masks, didn't wear them, had rubber gloves, basic stuff. When people talk about finding evidence and everything else, the situation was chaotic. 10,000 firemen, all firemen, working, tired, anything, all went to the scene and did what they could, which would make it a big mess. And everything was there. I spoke to people that night who talked about the building falling down, 7. I spoke to people beforehand, you know, the building's falling down, and we just talked about the dust and everything. They just talked about how loud 7 was. No one that I spoke to that night had any other thought. Even tonight before coming here, thinking it was something completely different, I called up a friend who was there, and I said, do you have anything? He said, well, he said 7 was when the world, and he was an officer and very bright. He said when the building fell down, it gouged out part of it, it was burning, there were no standpipes, which is the water, you know, you can only stretch a hose so far, the water to go. After a while, we just gave up. There was nothing we could do, pulled everybody out, just let it burn, and about 5 o'clock, it just fell down. And he was right around the corner. And he and other people I knew the day just said the sound was just enormous. Now, nobody...
Right before it collapsed?
No. Just the sound of the building collapse. Nothing specific. These are just firemen who were in the area, and they just said specific. So they just said loud noise. I never heard the specifics, even though I knew the one person well on the thing when he was saying explosion. I never heard the word explosion. I wasn't there that early. I just heard stories of panic, stories of luck. All the firemen I know who lived that day was luck. They were walking to the fire. 2 groups of men I know, their lives were saved because they had to take a dump. When you go into a big fire like that, it's a case of it's going to be 4 hours. It's like a siege, you know, and you're just going to be there. And I know 2 people that were walking along, and of course New York was very helpful that day. The super came out and says, you guys need anything? The guy said, yeah, we're going to go to the bathroom before we go. And one guy had to take a dump. He's taking a dump, and he heard the buildings come down. All the people I know who lived that day were, they would tell stories. They got to the elevator. people I know in 22 truck and 25 trucks. So the two groups get to the elevator. Who's got the elevator, who's got the stairs? And they decided the one who took the elevator died, the one who took the stairs lived. And everybody know you get to a hall, and people would tell the story, their group, one made a left, one made a right. So I have heard thousands of stories, many people there, personally know 100 people died. So it was all very interesting and all facts. So all this was completely new. Completely new. No conspiracy, just the buildings fell and everybody just worried about the death and trying to think how things could be thing. And all the reports I ever heard was poor communications, the radios and stuff like that, were just strictly firematic information. You know, just what could we do, what could we do better. So, very interesting. Oh, an interesting fact, when you were talking about fires, buildings built in New York City have the strictest fire code in the United States. When they built the World Trade Center, in order to, the constructor or the contractor likes to have the easiest code to make it easier. So because it was a tri-state building, they could use other code and federal code, so it wasn't as strict as New York City code. That's why the engineers would be talking about the different fire, things like that. Roosevelt Island was another building built because it was federal money. They said, well, since the federal people made it 40% paid 40% of the money, we can use 40% of their code and 60% of their others. So there's lots of information that you never know that went, and things that went in different buildings.
One thing that I heard.
To confirm a fact you said about elevators, I've heard people say that when the people came down about the fire in the elevator.
Oh, the fire came down through the elevator shaft.
Well, there's fire in the elevator. I heard people say there was fire in the elevator. So that would be an interesting thing for you to pursue.
Okay.
Did the fire come down or did the fire go up?
Oh. And these are reports that you heard personally?
I heard personally people talking about
were
when
fire.
the elevator came down, people came out and they were on fire and stuff like that.
And this was, well, obviously before the collapse and after the
Yes,
planes hit.
these are people who these are firemen who got there and the elevators came down and people on fire and stuff, and they talked about fire with the elevators. But the elevators were still working after the planes hit, because I know people who got into elevators. You know, the people who are all supposed to come downstairs, that's just a thing. And the elevators there, have you studied the elevators, how they had the sky lobbies and stuff?
No.
Because when you take the elevators would only go so far, and then you go out and you walk to the next level, so they could have elevators on top of elevators.
Okay.
So there's a lot of information about the elevators. If you were interested in elevators, you would have to pursue to find how the elevators went and who did it and how did things along. It was an interesting elevator system.
Okay.
And it was a very strange building. I worked in the firehouse in the 90s across the street, so the people went there all the time because they'd have alarms. If I worked there one day, you probably went there 6 times. And they had metal security and stuff like that, you know, like when you go to the movie theater or the
Metal
airport.
detector, yeah.
They had it in the 90s. So they had it before. You had to go through, and there was a security guard there. But since I was a fireman, I'd been there 3 times already, he knew who I was, you know, and you just walk around and laugh.
Yeah.
So it was a place that was very interesting.
Back to the codes. I understand that World Trade Center 7 was built 5 times stronger than required by code.
I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
No idea about that.
Yeah.
Be interesting to find out.
I'm trying to remember what video I saw that in, if it was in Loose Change or if it was in this video, or it may have been in Blueprint for Truth. If you've not seen Blueprint for Truth.
I haven't seen any of this.
Well, this DVD here is the endorsement for the science that architects and engineers for 911Truth present.
If you're looking for information, you would find out from the fire department and find out people who would have their cards and would inspect it and know a lot about the building. And you could find out who owned it, who paid for it, then find out about the code. It was built by city code.
Right.
And when it was built.
This is probably something you can't answer, but Larry Silverstein did an interview on BBC, and he said that he was talking to the fire marshal, And the fire marshal told him that he did not think they would be able to contain the fire. Larry Silverstein said, well, we've had so much loss of life. Maybe the best thing to do is to pull it. And then Larry Silverstein went on to say that the fire marshal made, or he said they made the decision to pull the building, and then we watched it collapse.
Was Larry Silverstein a fire marshal?
Larry Silverstein owned the lease on the World Trade Center complex.
Do you know the name of the fire marshal he was talking to?
No, I don't. But my question is, would the fire marshal have exclusive information about those buildings either being designed with explosives for self-destruction or retrofitted with explosives for self-destruction? And the reason I ask that is because those buildings had very sensitive information in them. They had all the Enron records, CIA, FBI, banking headquarters. I would assume that if I was a tenant in that building and I had sensitive documents that might even be a matter of national security, I might like to be in a building that could be destroyed at the push of a button. So it sounds like, with that hypothesis, it sounds like the fire marshal had information about that possibility.
I'll find out tomorrow.
There was a countdown that came across the emergency responders.
I know
I think it was a
marshals.
Red Cross.
I know fire marshals very well who work that day, and I will call up Phil tomorrow
Okay.
and ask him, say, oh, I met a bunch of people, and I will ask Phil about that.
Yeah.
And Phil is retired and very honest. His father was a minister, and Phil would say yes or no, something I never thought of.
Good. Great. And you got Steve's card there?
I got his
So-
card, and I got photos and books and newspapers, and
Great.
so very interesting.
It is.
Very interesting. I have questions to ask people to call up tomorrow and say,
Yeah.
whoa, and I'll find out interesting things.
If my phone will do it, can I show you a video real quick?
Sure.
If it'll play. Do you know these guys?
I don't know. If I change my glasses, maybe we could tell.
The stuff's in there.
I got it, I'll get it.
Okay, false. If this thing will do it, my battery's not good.
This is the captain, this is 7 Truck. So I met them, I was there that night. So if I called him up, he would know who I was. I could explain who I was, and he would know me. But that was the firehouse.
That was him?
Yeah.
Listen.
Yes, I heard this on the movie. So I met them all that night. So he's retired now. He was in the movie on 9/11. They interviewed him. Okay.
That's awesome.
That's who he is.
It's just awesome to meet you.
And I,
You know,
I'm a fat guy who made spaghetti. I made sauce.
awesome. Well, thank you for doing what you did.